Jacksonville is full of larger than life characters, but few stories are as dramatic as the 1928 shootout on what was then the St. Johns River Bridge, now known as the Acosta Bridge. Here to talk about it, I'm joined by author, educator, and creator of the JaxPsychoGeo blog, Tim Gilmore. Welcome, Tim.
Thank you, Ann. Good to be here.
Welcome back, I should say. It's nice to
Yeah,
see you.
yeah.
So, this shootout happened, as I said, in 1928 in
Mhm.
September, and it was really one of the most notorious crimes of the period. Who all
Right.
was involved in
Yeah.
this?
Yeah, this is absolutely sensational, this thing that happened, in the middle of the city, in the middle of what was then the only bridge over the river other than the railroad bridge next to it. And 2:15 in the afternoon. And it was Johnny Heisler. The Heisler family was infamous. We can talk about that a little bit in a minute, maybe. But Johnny Heisler was known as Duval's Liquor Czar or Whiskey King, all sorts of appellations like that. And there's a prohibition agent named Hope King, name to live up to, who stopped them on the bridge, and there was a toll. You had to stop and pay a toll ticket on the bridge, and this shootout ensued. uh, Heisler was carrying liquor from a place that was then called Mineral City, which is now Ponte Vedra,
Mm.
and it's hard to say who shot first, but the prohibition agent, who was just 26 years old, by the way, shot Heisler 5 times. Shot him once in the shoulder, twice in the chest, and twice in the back of the neck. And both men survived for a little while, but Heisler actually died that evening, and Hope ended up recovering.
It literally was like a scene from The Godfather, right? It's at the
Yeah,
toll booth.
right.
There's this shootout, this
Yeah,
fatal,
that's right.
and nobody else was hurt.
No. So there were, as far as how cinematic it seems to have been, there were differing accounts in the newspapers, and of course, then there were multiple newspapers, and there were evening editions and morning editions, right? So the next morning's edition had Hope King's account of what happened, and also had the account of the toll ticket
We actually have a
person.
picture of the Jacksonville Journal from that day.
Yeah,
That's from your
yeah.
blog. Yeah.
That's right, right. So banner headline across the top. And the descriptions of Hope King, he's being shot at. He was shot twice, and he's just kind of walking through this rain of bullets as Heisler drives away while he's shooting. I mean, it's the way the ticket taker described it was cinematically heroic, you know.
Of this agent, this
Yeah,
prohibition
yeah,
agent.
right, right.
So let's talk the Heislers because
Mm,
you say
mm.
that they really were one of the most notorious crime families in Northeast Florida at the
Yep,
time. Um, Johnny Heisler was this guy,
right,
the Whiskey King, but
yeah.
who in his family, what kind of family did he run with?
Oh, man. So, everybody knew who the Heislers were. Everybody had some fear of the Heislers, you know? They were responsible for at least, a dozen murders from the 1890s through the 1930s. They had people on both sides of the law. They were bootleggers, they were moonshiners, right? And they also, however, had, for example, Tom Heisler Sr. was a sheriff's deputy, and so he posed for pictures of him with moonshine stills that he had collected. So basically, what he's doing is taking out the family's competition while wearing the badge.
Ah,
And Tom Heisler Jr. Shot someone and killed someone when he was 15 years old because they refused him a drink. Clyde Heisler uh, was probably, I guess you could say, the tail end of the Heisler era. He was 20 years old when he shot and killed a married couple in a holdup in 1936, and he went to the electric chair in the early 40s. Um, they were, but they also were mixed in with people who ran the city. Johnny Heisler's funeral after this shootout had about 1,500 people show up. Pallbearers, this is from the Jacksonville Journal at the time. Pallbearers included prominent attorneys, police officers. There were police officers who were pallbearers at Johnny Heisler's funeral. So everybody knew who they were. They were, they had their own kind of reign of terror, but they had their fingers in everything that was going on in the city.
And so what is their legacy in the city? I had not heard the Heisler name. Is it the
Mm.
kind of thing that is still are their descendants still around?
There are, yes. I recently just briefly started talking with a descendant who is a retired police officer. So I haven't talked that much with him, but I look forward to talking more with him soon, and finding out what it was like to grow up, hearing and knowing some of these stories about your family. But this was a long time ago, right? Um, and but they are still known. I mean, people do occasionally tell these stories, and this shootout story is one of the most dramatic crime stories in the city's history.
So I mean, you in your blog always bring us through these rabbit holes and link to other stories and
Right.
such. And there's a lot of, cross connection
Yeah.
between some of them historically. How did you learn about this though in the first place?
Hmm. You know, uh, I think for years people have been, when I talk to friends who are interested in history, or a good friend who's an archivist here, they'll bring up this particular story, because it's that sensationalist. I don't know when I first learned about the Heislers. Actually, they're if you do much digging in this time period, it's hard not to run into them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So what was prohibition like here
Mm,
in Northeast Florida? I mean, how big of a deal was it to be a bootlegger
yeah.
like the Heisler family?
It was a really big deal. Yeah. So, in uh, in 1908, someone named Carrie Nation, fascinating figure, came to Jacksonville. She went around. She went. She traveled the country. She wore all black. She wore a black veil. She everywhere she went, she carried a Bible and a hatchet.
I think
Right?
we have a picture of her up on our
Yeah,
screen right now.
Carrie Nation, even her name, she came to Jacksonville in 1908, and she was temperance was the name of the movement to try to and get to a point of prohibition. She was a temperance crusader. She visited some of what were called euphemistically female boarding houses in La Villa. These were brothels. And she said that Jacksonville was not a democracy, it was a demonocracy. That's what she called it.
Wow.
1910, there was a statewide measure that Floridians voted against for prohibition in the state. But 1918, Jacksonville City Council went ahead and decided we're going to make the city dry. So Jacksonville went dry before national prohibition went into effect 2 years later.
Mm.
And uh, when you think of prohibition, you probably think of the mob bosses of the time, right? I mean, it was prohibition was very good for for particular kinds of illegal trade, and it was very good for the Heislers in that way.
And I'm just curious, Carrie Nation, what was the hatchet about? Do you know? A
She
Bible and a hatchet?
Yeah, well, I think largely it was symbolic, but sometimes I think she actually used the hatchet on doors of taverns and, sinful places, that she visited throughout the country.
She does sound of interest, and given that you've written now how many books about Jacksonville
Mm,
history?
24.
24.
Yeah.
Do you think that Carrie Nation might be on the list of
Well,
your
she was a national figure. I think there are probably, a couple of books about her already, but she is the kind of person I would wanna write more about.
Yeah,
That's true.
sounds right up your
Yeah,
alley.
right.
So John Heisler's grave now is in, a local cemetery.
Right.
adjacent to Riverside Memorial Park, kind of off
Yeah.
Normandy?
Yeah, it's kind of it's kinda strange because it is a cemetery inside a cemetery. It's this older cemetery, that, depending on the spelling, sometimes looks like Gravelly Hill and sometimes looks like Gravely Hill, but
Yeah.
the Heislers, there are some Heislers in there, and there's some other Heislers buried, further out of town, but his grave is right there.
And
Yeah.
if you wanna visit it, you can also stop by. I guess there's a few Leonard Skinner
Oh, true,
graves out
right?
that way too?
Yeah, they're in that I honestly, I have not visited them, but I know that they're out there in that general vicinity. That's true.
I think that the inspiration for the band's name, Leonard
Mhm.
Skinner, is actually
Mhm.
buried out there too. So there's this great
Sure, yeah.
Skinner synergy.
Make a whole day of the cemetery visit.
Right. Well, you can find a link to this story on our website. Tim Gilmore is the author of the JaxPsychoGeo blog. If you've never visited it, set aside a few hours because you will be entranced and loving chasing some of that history. So, Tim, thanks so much for being on again.
Thank you so much for having me.
All right.